All right. Welcome. Welcome to this podcast, which was born from a Europe class. Today I'm going to talk to you about a book called The German Car Industry My Part in Its Victory. This book was written by an author called James Rupert. I tried to find information about him, but I didn't really find anything. All I know is that he's still alive. He was born in 1947. He's German. And well, in the first chapter of this book, he talks a lot about himself and about how he used to enjoy the music in the cars and how in those times in the 1980s the CD wasn't really a thing, so they had to use cassettes. So yeah, the first chapter of this book is nothing really important to this podcast because we try to center on what happened during the war and all of that. But during this first chapter, he talks about himself, his career choices, how he started to study law, and after decided to start selling cars. And he also talks about all of the magazines and car blogs he worked on and he has written for. What else? Well, yeah, that's pretty much the first chapter. Just things about his life, his personal life, his parents, his career, and how he ended up selling cars for just 2 years. And after that, he got fired. But he started writing. He started writing about cars, and he's got a lot of. I believe there is about 22 books about cars written by him, and he talks a lot about BMWs, which are his favorites. But what is important for us and for this podcast is what I read in the second chapter. So there are two quotes that I read in this second chapter that I really liked. The way he tried to send this message. So the first quote says, "Their industry had been building up since the late 1940s. They consolidated throughout the 1950s, innovated in the 1960s, got their products right in the 1970s, and arguably the market spot on in the 1980s. So, what does he mean with this? Well, he's talking about Germany. That actually the whole book talks about the German car companies. So I really like this quote because I think it really points out how Germany got to where they are in talking about cars. Because from the 1940s to the 1980s were pretty turbulent and rough times in Germany. But, they started in the 1940s. And the second quote, it resonates with the first quote because it says, Germans invented the car industry. It gets blown up. Then they have to invent it all over again. And then they make their industry great. So that's basically what happened with Germany, They literally invented the car. Then all of these wars happened. Germany got literally destroyed. And they had to build from the ground up. And it's actually very interesting how they had to merge a lot of companies and have a lot of deals with other companies from other countries. And I'm going to talk to you about all of that in a minute. So I'm realizing right now that I forgot to introduce myself. So, my name is Antonio, and I'm going to continue with the podcast. So, right, I'm going to talk about the three main companies that he talks about in this book. So the first one he talks about is Mercedes Benz. You know, this famous company, and how it was invented by these two amazing engineers. And you know, Daimler Benz AG was the first name of this company, and they basically created the whole industry of motor car. And so in 1886, the car was born because this guy called Daimler decided to install a motor designed by Benz on a carriage, but he put the engine instead of the horse. So, how was Mercedes-Benz born? Mercedes-Benz born. So we have a guy called Gottlieb Daimler, who decided to put the engine into the carriage, and we have Carl Benz, who invented the engine. Well, not invented the engine, but at the time was producing engines, and happened to work with Daimler. And there was a third person very important in this story. His name was Jelinek. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but it's Jelinek. He was a very wealthy automotive entrepreneur, and actually it was because of him that Mercedes-Benz is called Mercedes, which he named the first prototype for racing. Well, they three decided to name this first prototype for racing. They named it Mercedes after Jelinek's oldest daughter. So yeah, that's how Mercedes-Benz was born. Then we have a story about, let me check my notes. We have the story of Auto Union, which later became this brand known as Audi, which, you know, throughout all of the conflict had to join forces. There were four companies, and throughout from 1932 to 1938, they joined forces between these four brands. One was DKW, the other one had a name which is Wanderer, and you know, there was Auto Union and the other one. So these four companies joined, and you know, it took them 6 years to merge and do all of that. But by 1938, they had 25% of the German car market. So they were a very, very important company, and later became what we know now as Audi. And what else? What else do we have? So yeah, something very funny, or should I say interesting, was how in their way to rebuilding their industry, actually Germany created this standard for all the other countries making cars. So also in the book, Rupert does this whole section of the chapter where he talks about where he compares every country making cars with with Germany cars. And what I found interesting about this is that he solely compares the the brands with the Beetle, the Volkswagen Beetle. So he starts saying the German car industry versus the British car industry, and he shows the example of the British Beetle, which was the Morris Minor, and he does this with every country. So we have the British industry with the Morris Minor. We have the French industry with the 500. We have the Italian car industry. No, I switched that. So it was the Italian car industry with the Fiat 600. It was the French industry with the 4CV Renault. There was also this Swedish car brand, which made a car which was called the 93, and it was pretty much a Beetle with a Scandinavian style. And the only ones that didn't copy the German Beetle were the Americans, which never made a Beetle but bought a lot of them. And yeah, that's pretty much it. That's pretty much what I've read. I believe that the next chapter, which would be chapter 3, is going to talk a lot more about what's interesting to us, how the war affected, how the Cold War affected in all of this. Because by now he talks a lot about how there were a lot of problems after World War II because all of the factories were destroyed, but he doesn't talk a lot about the Cold War. The only thing he mentions about this period of the Cold War was a factory that was from BMW, and it ended up in hands of Russia. So there's actually certain models of BMWs that were produced in a factory in Eisenach, and these BMWs are actually in the badge, instead of having blue, they have red. And in the book he says that they were really, really bad cars. But yeah, later that factory was recovered by BMW on the east side. But yeah, they were actually a BMW from the east and a BMW for the west at this time, which is very interesting how this division in Germany, how do I say it? This division in Germany, I don't know how to say it, but you get the point. We have a brand, a very famous brand, having two different logos with different colors because of this division of Germany. And actually, those BMWs sold with the red logo were called the EMWs, which stands for Eisenach Motorenwerk. And what else? Right, so another point he touched with the Cold War was about, okay, so the last point I remember from the second chapter, in which he was also talking about the Cold War, was that actually Auto Union was the only company that successfully transplanted from East to West Germany and was reborn this way. All the other companies had a lot of trouble with this situation of Germany being divided, but Auto Union was the only one that was successfully removed from the east and brought to the west, and it actually worked very well for auto union. But yeah, that's pretty much what I recall from these first two chapters. And as I said, I hope there is a lot more Cold War references in the next chapter. But I think it's been pretty interesting to read how these three wars affected the car industry in Germany, and how not only it affected in a bad sense during that time, but at the end it made them the best ones and made every other country copy them. So yeah, I hope you like this podcast, and we'll see you in the next one.